everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of season 3 of Backseat Designers, which is the podcast where three friends, that's me and my lovely co-hosts, whom I'll be introducing in a minute, sit around and bitch about adventure games. I'm Fredrik Olsen, Fred for short, and I'm joined by Troels Pleimert. Say hello, Troels.
Hello.
And Gareth Millward. Say hello, Gareth.
Hello.
Now, for those of you who aren't backing us on Patreon, and you'll receive a link for that by the end of the show, what has happened between Season 2 and Season 3 is that we decided to invite Gareth on, who is a good mutual friend and whom we owed a favor because he's hosting our website, and he did Open Crowdsource with us. And this is
I can seriously hear Gareth rolling his eyes right now.
Yeah, it's kind of a questionable way to repay the favor. But
I was going to say, you think that you think you're doing me a favor right now?
I'm doing a great. Well, we're doing your career a great favor. You just don't know it yet.
Spectacular favor. You just shut the fuck up.
When you're 69 years old and you're incredibly close to death, you'll look back on this as the apex of your life.
I have a feeling that this show will have an effect on my career. I'm not sure it's going to have the effect that you think it will.
Well, we'll just have to wait and see, won't we? Now, today we're going to cover the subject of walking simulators, and that in itself is kind of an oddball of a genre, so...
Which is why we picked it for the first topic.
Exactly.
Deep end, everyone.
Yeah, let's dive headfirst into it. Trolls, please do explain what a walking simulator is.
Dive into the deep end of the semen pool. Wait, that's an odd metaphor. What a walking simulator is. Right, cool. As far as I would define it, is that a walking simulator is a game where you don't so much solve puzzles or engage in combat or any other sort of, let's say, classic form of game interaction, as much as you experience a story and you are literally walking through a story. It's not in the visual novel sense, where you just basically switch screens and talk to characters and such. A walking simulator is more that you explore an environment, and the environment has a story to tell, be it just the environment itself, or through some voiceover narration, or through even conversation with NPCs. But you don't have. Let's say you don't. I was going to say you don't have much input on the story. That's not exactly true, because I am going to get back to that in a minute with my example. But it is more of an experience than it is gameplay. Now, of course, I already know. Having said that, I can feel Ben Chandler breathing down my neck when I say that.
He's always breathing down your neck, though.
Oh yeah, he's a lizard, isn't he? He's like the lizard on my shoulders. Hi Ben, I love you. But He has this phrase that I desperately want emblazoned on a T-shirt, which is that exploration is gameplay. And therein, I think I've just shown my colors here. Walking simulators, which is sometimes used as sort of a derogatory term for it's not really a game. I mean, you don't play.
It's not a game. It's an experiment.
Or an experience. Now, see, I want to bring that around to a positive one, even though experiment is also positive for sure. But it's an experience. Like you experience a movie or a good novel, or you experience a play, like you actually go to.
And we lost him.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, well, that's a very good start. He was kind of breaking up by the end of it. I thought, well, hopefully he'll stick with us, but turns out that he wouldn't. I'll just call him up and we can have a vote afterwards if we want to keep this in.
Well, while he's gone, maybe I'll
maybe you'll get a word in.
Yeah. Well, while he's gone, I can get a word in. Well, I quite what fascinates me about this is that it seems that there's this argument that he brought up novels and he brought up plays as this kind of thing that's to be experienced that perhaps isn't the kind of the mainstream idea of the walking simulator, the mainstream idea of a game. And I wondered really, and when he gets back, maybe he can answer this, whether that because of that, the sort of the walking simulator isn't supposed to be this typical kind of 5 to 6 hour, and I know you don't like measuring game length in hours, but it's not meant to be this sort of big kind of AAA length kind of game with that kind of depth of gameplay is meant to be a sort of a half-hour thing, an hour-long thing. A bit like Serena, which I know is a game that both of you were involved with, where there wasn't much sort of real sort of puzzle-solving or gameplay. It was about moving around the nodes in that cabin and trying to discover everything that was in the cabin so that you could piece together the last moments of, spoiler alert.
Yeah, and something that I think that is typical of walking simulators is that, well, that's not too a derogative term either, but it's kind of like games trying to be art, in the sense that many of them, and again I do stress this is not a derogative term for me, but many of them kind of try to awaken emotions in the player rather than. You may not have a clear-cut story by the end of it, and you certainly don't do that in Serena, and you don't in Gone Home. But the emotions that you go through as the player are usually pretty heavy.
I just got totally and utterly shafted. I actually thought you guys had hung up on me because you were sick of me talking.
No, you kind of broke up. It sounded vaguely like a radio breaking slowly, and then you just vanished.
But the pros that we are, we carried on without you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We actually let Gareth get a word in. So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, the voice of Dr. Gareth Millwood, and that's the last you'll ever hear of it.
But to answer your question, Mr. Millwood, I do believe that Doctor Who, is that yes, you're absolutely right. It does have that. It's not of a great length kind of thing. At least I haven't seen a quote unquote full length walking simulator. I mean, some of them can go on for quite a while, but it really is about exploring an environment, and exploring an environment can take anything from half an hour to, I don't know, the first time I played Gone Home, I was stuck at the screen for 4 hours. Not that it takes 4 hours to get from point A to point B in Gone Home. It's just simply that there was so much to explore and so much to ponder, not to get all what's the word I'm looking for? Pretentious. That's the one I'm looking for.
Yeah, right. The point isn't so much to have a long linear experience. Actually, it can be an incredibly short experience if you just want to speed run through it. But there are so many small paths that you can walk down that it can turn into well, I think Gone Home took about 3 or 4 hours for me to complete over multiple sittings. So something like that, tops.
I did it all in one go, and it was from like 1 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was just glued. I had no idea what I was going into, and I've already sung that game's praises so many times. I'm not going to do that again. But yeah, it's one of those immersion things, because when we think of gameplay as in traditional gameplay, going way back to the genesis of computer gaming, is that you're tasked with accomplishing a goal. Sometimes that goal, or oftentimes that goal, is achieved through, rising of levels, overcoming some sort of obstacle, engaging in either combat or platforming, sort of getting from point A to point B to point C to point D, and sort of going through the levels. In adventure games, you're faced with a certain amount of obstacles because you have this end game to reach, and the game throws these obstacles. What's missing from most walking simulators is this palpable sense of cock blocking, to put it frankly. Even though, like in Gone Home, for instance, you have locked doors that you can't progress through without finding the right key and the right combination for the locker and stuff like that. But all of those things are, the keys and the combination and such are found through exploration, not because you have to solve a puzzle. It's not like you have to, oh god, this, like most adventure games, you come up to this code lock on a door and it goes, oh my fucking god, I have to figure out the combination. It's probably some wild mathematical formula that I have to decode and some shit.
Like a Tex Murphy game, because Tex Murphy games do share, apart from the cutscenes in the FMV, Tex Murphy games do share some technical similarities with walking simulators, but they're not really, because Tex Murphy gives you a linear story, and it gives you these incredibly cock-blocking logic puzzles.
Exactly, and I do think I think you just hit something very special there, apart from my cock, obviously. Which is that linear progression. Many of these walking simulators, first of all, they sort of present you with the notion that the world is open to you. Now, a game like Gone Home does lead you on a linear string, but at least to me, it didn't feel like it was pushing you along that path.
No.
I mean, there's a genuine sense of accomplishment in most adventure games, and certainly in most arcade and FPSs and RTSs and all that. When you accomplish part of the story, then you move on to the next thing. In Gone Home, it's just sort of, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? Oh, you can't go through that door. That door's locked, but there's a key somewhere. And I'm not going to tell you where it is, but just have a look around. You'll probably find it. It sort of nudges you gently along the story path.
I want to latch on to you. You mentioned FPSs and RPGs, and I want to latch onto that because obviously the listeners might not know this, but of course we talk a little bit in advance of each episode to
don't pull back the curtain.
Okay, nothing is planned. Nothing is planned.
Pay no attention to the thread behind the curtain.
And only if we'd had a conversation about the episode prior to actually taping it, we would probably have talked about, what we were going to talk about. And Gareth might along the way have mentioned modern gaming as opposed to walking simulators. So Gareth, do you want to get into this hypothetical point that you would have made had you done things like that? Nice rescue operation. You have to agree with that.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't. What I'd like to build on what Troll said and sort of talk about that, because
that build-up just went nowhere, didn't it?
I thought it was a very nice build-up. Thank you for ruining it for me. But instant forgiveness granted. Go ahead, sir.
Well, yeah, I think we'll end up talking about that pretty quickly anyway. What came out of it for me was the way that Trolls was talking was that the phrase that came into my mind was world building, and this idea that you are immersed in this world. It's not just that there are characters that are just thrown in there because they need to be there to allow you to get from A to B. You don't have puzzles that are in there just because you've got to keep the player occupied so that they don't riot at paying $40 for a computer game that they complete in 3 minutes. You don't get that cock blocking, but what you do get is you get these very deep worlds, and I think that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about open world games like Grand Theft Auto, was that if you didn't want to deal with the actual storyline, there was this massive world with all these streets and these people that you could go in and you could find different things that were going on and move around. And I wondered, I mean, given that this is backseat designers, of course, not just backseat players, whether there's something quite exciting about having this sort of game mechanic where not only can you go in as a player and discover this rich kind of world with all these little nuances and little nooks and crannies, but also to create a world like that must be really satisfying if you pull it off.
Well, there is the difference between a sandbox and a walking sim. I totally love the idea of the sandbox environment where you can just go anywhere and do anything, and which was one of the main drawing powers for me when I first played Grand Theft Auto 3. I didn't want to complete any missions. I just wanted to climb to the nearest rooftop and pick off motherfuckers with my sniper rifle, which I suppose everyone did, especially when they found cheat codes. But the difference, I think, is that with a walking sim, you are engaging in a preset narrative that's been put down, whereas in a sandbox game, you're kind of creating your own narrative. Today, I'm a psychopathic sniper on a roof. The next day, I'm mowing down prostitutes in my Corvette or something.
I agree, and I think that's what's so interesting about these walking sims that we're talking about, actually, is that it takes a lot of skill, I think, to pull off a game which if you asked anybody that's just a casual game player, they'd say there's no gameplay here, but I haven't got the freedom to do what I want. I have to stick to this particular narrative. So you as the game designer, you've got to create a world that's rich enough to keep people interested, a narrative that's tight enough to keep people within the confines of the game without it just seeming like, as you said earlier, cock blocking, and have that kind of plot that makes sense, a plot that's engaging, a world that's immersive and engaging, and have it all come together and work. I mean, that must be really difficult to do.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that these walking sims usually, in a traditional first-person adventure game, you might have some kind of inner narration, or you might have an external narrator, like Gary Owens, who clues you in as to what the plot is in a more direct manner. But here you're kind of, in Gone Home, you're very much uncovering the plot piece by piece in your own order. I don't think there is not one set way to progress through Gone Home. There is an A and there is a B, but you define the path there yourself. The emotional impact varies a lot depending on what you uncover, in which order.
And there's a lot of different paths that you can take through the game. There isn't just a main story. There are a couple of side stories, and what you focus on uncovering is really what you get out of it. There's a main story, which is the love story that everyone on Tumblr is infatuated with, and I will confess, nearly brought a tear to my eye as well. And there's all this family history that you can uncover, which is really dark and disturbing and such. It does, however. Gone Home is masterfully designed, in my opinion, because while it does give you the sense of freedom, as in you're uncovering these at your own leisure, and you're basically uncovering all of these pieces of the story bit by bit in the order of your choosing, you're actually not. The game does kind of gently nudge you, again, down this set path. You can't immediately skip to the ending because of locked doors and such, but you can uncover bits of the story in any order you choose. But to progress, you have to move through some cock blocking, although not the cock blocking that we're used to from adventure games. This is merely just you have to, for instance, to discover. Spoiler alert! Of course, on Backseat Designers, we always spoil. So if you haven't played Gone Home, this goes back to season 1. We don't give a shit. If you haven't played the game, just stop listening.
Yeah, turn it off.
In Gone Home, if you to discover that your little sister was actually a lesbian, you have to get into her locker, which is in her room. You have to find the combination. She hid the combination in these panels in the walls. She ripped the combination in two, so there are 2 scraps of paper that you have to uncover in 2 different places. You can't get to those places without triggering several diary entries of her story.
Well,
so
that much is true, but if you think about some of the family stuff, which you can only discover by looking at certain inventory items that are slightly hidden from your view. I get the thing with the diary entries, but the other thing really colors your experience of the game as well. And lots of the stuff that you showed me when we played it on BSD Plays, which is available over on YouTube, by the way, I hadn't noticed upon my first playthrough on my own. And it really changed my experience of the game a lot. Of course, there is kind of a main path, as there is in sandbox games, if you want to engage in any kind of story. But there is so much stuff on the side to discover that'll add all these small splashes of color everywhere.
Well, shock horror, I haven't played this game, which will not come as any surprise.
Well, we don't. We also want to get into walking simulators and not just walking simulator. And Trolls, I'm not going to replicate the build-up, but you might have mentioned that you wanted to dive into the Stanley Parable. And there's a game I haven't played. So how does that relate to this Gone Home talk we're having?
In the sense, actually, I want to what's the word I'm looking for? Juxtapose. That's the one. My vocabulary is shot. I want to juxtapose that.
None of my build-ups lead anywhere.
I'm going somewhere.
I'm really trying here.
I was just going. You just interrupted the good doctor in the middle of a sentence, didn't you? But never mind. I want to juxtapose that between the Stanley Parable and a different walking sim, which is called The Beginner's Guide. Now, The Beginner's Guide is, to briefly recap, it's a very, very linear story. You almost have no interaction to speak of. It is basically an essay, an interactive essay written by some guy who is telling you, the player, about this friend he used to have, and his friend created all of these magnificent computer games that are sort of obtuse, and the game itself, the beginner's guide, loads up these different games that this friend of his made, and you sort of experience these, and the narration keeps moving you forward. Like, and then in the next version, he put a door in here. Bing, door appears and such. It's very linear progression, and there's little to no like world exploration as such, because you're basically just expected to walk through these things. I mean, you have free movement, you can look at anything you want, but the narration kind of drives itself. You don't pick up scraps of paper like in Gone Home. It basically just drives itself. So I want to juxtapose that with the Stanley Parable, which is an amazing example of. First of all, it's kind of a meta treatise of the interactive medium itself, because the entire prelude, or the entire build-up of the Stanley Parable, is Stanley awoke in his office. He'd been sitting in front of his computer. He walked down the hallway and he came across 2 doors. That's it. And once you get to the 2 doors, the narrator, the omnipresent narrator, says, Stanley walked through the left door. And you as the player are still standing in front of the door, so you can just go, fuck you, narrator, I'm going through the right door. And the narrator will go, well, Stanley was a bit confused. He walked through the right door anyway. And and the narrator then tries to sort of make the story fit his original design. If you just keep on doing anything that the narrator doesn't want you to do, eventually he'll get fed up with you and start berating you for ruining his story. And I'm serious, it goes quite a long way. At some point, he'll just go, right, you don't want to play my story at all, do you? Well, here's something else I've been working on. And then he displays you with this mini game of a baby and a fire, and the baby keeps crawling towards the fire, and he instructs you to press a button, which will make the baby retract again. And he just goes, right, well, you just play this for 4 hours then. And the game just stops there. I mean, you just sit there and actually press this button for 4 hours. And if you do that, it rewards you with some sort of different ending. If you decide to let the baby die, then it just goes, right, well, that wasn't good enough for you then. And then it teleports you into Minecraft. And it just keeps going like that.
Good heavens.
What the fuck?
And this game has so many different outcomes. I don't know if it has like 15 or 20 different endings, all depending on the choices you make in front of those 2 doors in the beginning. And this is one of those games where once if you meet your untimely end, for instance, then the game resets. But occasionally it'll just give you the illusion that it has reset. Because when you exit and walk down the hallway, suddenly something will be different, and the narrator will go, wait, that's not supposed to happen. And you're constantly at a loss as to where this game is going. What's it trying to tell me? So that's a game that I feel offers you the most freedom that you can get from a walking simulator. The game basically tells you to build your own story, or at least it says, I've got a story for you. Would you like to see it? And you can go, fuck you. The hell I will. And you can go walk off a completely different path. And the design document for this game must have been staggering.
Yeah, so, it's kind of interesting, because in certain classic point and click games, we were basically able to. That's hilarious. We're basically able to do the same thing. I mean, it would always end the game, of course. But how many times did you guys have Roger Wilco die in Space Quest, and that was somehow part of the narrative? It became part of the narrative that this is where the stupid guy really fucked it up.
And I think that's what's quite interesting about the way that these games have kind of evolved over time, is because I think at their core, the idea of these was to tell a particular story. Almost this idea, especially with the sort of the Sierra and LucasArts during their kind of heyday in the early to mid 90s, there was this idea that you were sort of almost playing a movie. That was the kind of the sort of the vibe that they were going for, and that's why they kept chucking in all sorts of various bits of technology that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't.
You even had games that branded themselves as interactive movies for a while in the 90s, so that was a thing.
Yeah, I mean, in an attempt to sort of break into the mainstream and get different markets. What interests me about some of these walking simulators, and you talk about having that ridiculous design document is as far from a Hollywood movie script as you can possibly get. And I wonder actually whether we've got to the point that because the 2000s happened, and we can't really get away from that, whether some of these games are sort of okay, well, let's go back to the 90s and see what was good about adventures and the story building and the multiple things that you could do within the confines of a computer game. And let's see how far we can run with that, and let's see what we can do with that. And if you do it properly and there's some kind of internal consistency to the narrative and to the world that you're in, it seems like, I mean, Trolls, would you say that the games that you've brought up so far, they pull that off?
I would say that's a very, very interesting and possibly quite correct assumption that what these walking simulators are doing are looking at where adventure games ended up, like late 90s, 2000s, until their supposed death and then resurrection, was that they became more and more focused on either eschewing gameplay entirely in favor of just telling a quote-unquote Hollywood kind of story, parentheses, in a shit way.
Phantasmagoria.
or that they just completely eschewed storytelling in favor of putting in puzzles. And walking simulators really go back to I want to tell a story, first and foremost. I don't want to keep putting obstacles in the way because the player expects obstacles. I've seen adventure game players, and I'm speaking for myself here, I've seen adventure game players who are sitting down to play an adventure game, and they will just almost speed run through it. They'll skip all the dialogue. They'll just go, right, what do I have? What do I need to accomplish? They don't want to experience like the world that some designer or writer has carefully crafted around them. They just want to get to the end because apparently now it's all about accomplishment and Steam achievements and all that bullshit.
Yeah, and the end games were always ridiculously disappointing back in our day, weren't they?
Well, I don't know.
That wasn't why most of the time, that wasn't why we played them. It wasn't to see Roger Wilco succeed. It was everything that went in between. Something that I thought of while you guys were talking and making some points that I absolutely agree with.
While you weren't actually listening.
Yeah, while I was waiting for my turn to speak, I thought...
Children.
Now, I wound up, because you guys are comparing games with... games that went before and with Hollywood movies. Something I thought of is how these walking simulators are quite beautifully, kind of like an evolution of what we can do with the literary medium. It's kind of an evolution of literature in that when Aristotle wrote Poetics way back when, he started out saying that a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it seems like we're kind of tinkering with that now. Do all stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end? In the medium, if the medium of the walking simulator, they may wind up getting one, but it's not always the one the developer set up for you.
Well, what I would say is that actually what's happening in a lot of these things is that you've got multiple stories and there are multiple beginnings, middles, and ends, and they're all looping in and out of each other, and a lot of those stories are not necessarily they're constructed by the player in the sense that they pick up one. I mean, and I know that you two were involved in this, so perhaps this is a bad example because I hate giving you any credit for anything.
Blush again.
One of the good things about Serena was
I'm hard.
You pick little bits out of a number of different stories of this couple's life. And you end up although obviously the game is moving you towards this is the particular story that actually got us to the end game and Scott Murphy's cameo. But there are all sorts of little different stories that you kind of put together yourself as to who these people are. And at various different points, you have different stories about the type of character that these people are. And from what Trolls has said about Gone Home, and I'm again I'll apologise. This will come up a lot this series that I haven't played that one. But from what
not my area, mate.
from what Trolls was saying about Gone Home, it seems that there's lots of different sub stories, and while each of those stories might have a beginning, a middle, and end, where you put those beginning, middle, and ends isn't necessarily controlled by the author, and you're getting into a very weird kind of meta sort of thing. And I don't know. I mean, isn't that how we live our lives? That we explore the world around us and we build our own stories out of the scraps of information we find?
Yeah, and this is like a very postmodern literary concept, isn't it? That the author is dead and the reader or the person experiencing this work of art is kind of putting the pieces together by themselves.
I'm just finger wagging here because I'm literally, my cock is itching because this is exactly the sort of discussion I was hoping we would have, and this is why I dearly loved adventure games in the first place as a kid, was that with movies and books and plays and such classic literary mediums, you have a beginning, middle, and end because that's what the author of the piece has decided for you. Of course, we got improv theater and such where the audience can sort of shape it, but then they just lean back and watch it unfold. With interactive mediums, you yourself are walking around trying to engage the story and trying to evolve the story. And with classic adventure games, you have, for instance, let me put this in the form of an example because I can get very long-winded. No shit.
Can you?
Oh, really?
You have, yeah. Try me, mister. Like say the first Gabriel Knight game, which is a spectacular classic, and we all love it to bits. At least I think we do. I wish he wouldn't do that. At least if we're not counting the Phoenix Online remake. Sorry, is a much beloved classic. Now, it is, to be absolutely fair, a very, very linear story where even so far as it is split into days, like you complete, like it's almost like a level in Super Mario Brothers. You complete level 1, you go on to level 2 and such. It could work. And it also did work as any other form of medium. If you just take out the interactive portion of it, it's not really essential to the game itself, or at least to the story itself. The puzzles in Gabriel Knight are really cock blocks. They do fulfill you in the sense that you uncover the story by solving puzzles. You progress through the story, but then they are basically cock blocking exercises to sort of impede your progress, to make you think about various bits. I mean, the whole writing stuff on the wall with that brick and trying to, having to decode the voodoo language and such. The story does not progress because you decode that language. It progresses because Gabriel figures out how to write the message on the wall.
Yeah.
And he could have arrived at that at any number of different ways. What walking simulators do, and here's my point finally, what walking simulators do, yeah, there is to remove the cock block from the equation, really. And if there is a puzzle in a walking simulator, which there rarely is, but let's just take the locker in Gone Home, which is the closest thing that thing gets to a puzzle in my thing.
I agree.
Imagining? Yeah, it's the only real cock block, which is that you have to find 2 scraps of paper. The game basically telegraphs where they are. You pick up a map where there's a big fucking red circle where the pieces are. So you basically just have to go and fetch them and then put them in the correct order. The paper's only torn in 2 halves, so you have to be really, really slow in the head or thinking with your cock. My favorite word is cock, by the way. To not be able to guess this, so it basically it doesn't impede your progress as much as it was a way for the designers to control the speed at which you uncovered the game's mysteries. It's not a puzzle. So that's where I think, like you guys said, to bring it all the way round back, is that walking sims are going back to I want to tell a story, but I want to tell a story on the premise of an interactive medium instead of I want to tell a story. Which medium should I choose? This could be a book, this could be a movie, this could be a game, this could be whatever. The Stanley Parable would not work as a novel. It would not work as a movie because it requires the player to make a conscious decision. Gabriel Knight works as a novel. It would work fine as a book. The same with Pandora Directive, another favorite of my adventure game pantheon. Stanley Parable would not. Gone Home might, but it would remove a lot of the, Gone Home as a movie would be quite dull, I think.
It's kind of interesting because I get the feeling from what you're saying that what these walking sims are also doing is retracing our steps as a people who like telling stories. It's kind of going back to the first stories of man, where people would sit around campfires and someone would start telling a story, and the story would probably be shaped by how people reacted to it and which questions were asked during that. Exactly. That's what you can do with walking simulators that you cannot do with a traditional linear game.
Yeah, and it exactly goes back to what I've been saying 1,000 times, and I will now repeat for the 1,001st time.
I'm sure the listeners are very happy. Also, incidentally, can you do me can you do me a favor before continuing? Whenever you feel like saying cock, please replace the word cock with flesh noodle.
I will do that.
Thank you.
Okay, so releasing my grip on my flesh noodle, I will now continue. What I've been saying for a long time is that London Bridge is falling down. What I was saying was that computer games, and especially back then I would say adventure games, but now I'm just going to say interactive medium, is a logical progression from like campfire stories to traditional literary mediums. It's another stepping stone into it's an evolution of telling stories, of storytelling. It's not just an alternate way. It's the next step. It involves you.
I completely agree with that because I mean even something like, and you won't be surprised to know that I haven't read this. But
it's not his area. In his defense,
it's like season 3's catchphrase. Gareth hasn't X.
My wife is an ex-English teacher, a writer, and has at least 3 degrees in English. So I have heard a lot about a novel by a Russian chap, up-and-comer, called Leo Tolstoy, called War and Peace.
Such promise.
Yeah, he does show promise.
I love his albums.
Yeah, he's a little bit hack, but you know, I mean, he seems to have sold a few units, so you know. When you look at a book like Anna Karenina or War and Peace, there's a lot of characters, and each of them has their own backstory. And if you really want to, you can immerse yourself in all of these different characters and all the different points in their life and all the different things that are going on. There are all these kind of subplots going on, but at the core of it, you've got the main novel, you've got the main story of Anna's descent into madness, spoiler, and her relationship with her husband and with her beau. All of that kind of stuff.
Can't believe you just spoiled Tolstoy.
This is one of the most insulting things that have ever been done on this show, and we set the bar pretty low, to be honest.
Yeah, well, to be honest, if you haven't read it by now, you're a little late to the...
I was planning to read it, but now I won't have to.
Descent into Madness, I'm done. Yeah, good. Carry on.
So I completely agree with you that this is an evolution of storytelling. It's not an alternative, because all of those subplots, all of those different things that are going on in the background to flesh out the world and make it feel more tactile and concrete and real, those are presented to you, but they're not presented to you in the sense of, and now in chapter 3, we're going to take a little sidestep from the main story and tell you about Vronsky's upbringing and all that kind of stuff. That's not going to happen. What happens is that if you want to do what Fred said, where you've got these people that just click through what they have to do to beat the game, and that's what they see the experience as, then they'll just get the main plot, or even half the main plot, because they've skipped through most of the dialogue, and they'll get to where they need to go. But those people that want to really immerse themselves in that world will take on those little subplots, but they won't take them on necessarily at a particular point. They'll take them on at the point that they're ready to uncover them and experience them. And that is a very different way than being sort of giving you it in a book or in a TV series or something like that.
Exactly. Gone Home's main criticism, apart from its price tag, which I will agree with, it's a very pricey game, was that there was no replayability value Fuck you. Of course there was. You just went from point A to point B, got to the end, and decided that, oh, this teenage love story is not for me. I'm not gonna experience any more of this. There's
There
no more to uncover.
absolutely is. Saying that there isn't replay value of Gone Home is like saying that there isn't re-watching value in a certain film, or that you won't get any value out of rereading a certain book. You absolutely will, because you're not able to process that much at once. So inevitably there'll be subtexts and little moments that you've missed. And this is true of a walking sim like Gone Home as well.
It is kind of, without drawing comparison, of course, it is like saying that, oh, well, Blade Runner was about this policeman who haunted robots. It was kind of fun. And then just go, that's it. Maybe you should try it a different time, just to see if there's a subtext crawling up that you might have missed the first time around.
Maybe you should try one of the other cuts. Blade Runner is kind of like an oddball example. Something I'm incredibly fascinated by this discussion of walking sims versus literature, and a work of literature. If I could pronounce that word right, this might work better. But one written work that I can think of, which probably comes closest to replicating that huge, multifaceted experience that is a walking simulator, would be Ulysses by James Joyce, simply because it's stream of consciousness put to paper.
Just to interject here, because that's my thing. What Gareth was talking about is that a novel will possibly at some points sidestep the main narrative to give you some background. I mean, for instance, take The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's infamous for just completely jumping ship and just talking about something that has no bearing on the main story whatsoever.
Not all novels will automatically do that, but some certainly will. Yeah.
But it will, and you as the reader, as the perceiver of the story, I don't want to use the word forced, but I'm going to. You are forced to accept this sidestep, because this is now what the author wants you to do. In an interactive medium, not just walking sims, in an interactive medium, you are not compelled to go down this sidestep path. You can ignore it completely. You will lose some flavor, possibly, but you can get from point A to point B and complete the game without having experienced this extra flavor. In a novel, in a movie, in a play and such, you are basically compelled to go down that road, because that's what the author says you're supposed to do now.
That's true.
We are coming up on the 40-minute mark, aren't we?
Yeah, and I think it's probably time to round off, unless any of you have any finishing points that you want to get in.
I wanted to get in a little finishing point about...
so that's 10 minutes. Remember that you, the listener, are forced to deal with this sidestep.
Yes, exactly. This is a linear medium. You click play. The only other option you have is to get the fuck off our backs. Now, I just want to quickly bring this down to earth, because we have been talking a lot about how we value walking simulators. At least I do a lot. Fred is sort of on board, and Gareth at least has his interest peaked.
I'm intrigued. I think if you can do this properly, it has the potential to be incredible. I also think if you do it badly, it becomes useless.
Yes, and that's exactly what I want to get into, because now it's the backseat designer part of the show, where some of the detriments of walking simulators, some of the pitfalls that they can fall into, some of the things that they should stop doing. My main gripe about Gone Home, for instance, is that for some strange reason they introduced this mechanic where you can pick up literally every object in the house, everything. You can pick it up, rotate it around, and put it down wherever you want to. And there is no reason, I repeat, no reason at all, because every time you pick up an inventory item, it is immediately transported into your inventory.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting, because Amnesia did this as well, and I would also posit that's a walking sim, but that's a discussion best saved for another time. But I was really reminded about Amnesia, and in that case it makes sense, because that's a horror game, and you might think that you can deflect an attacking monster by throwing shit at it, but in Gone Home it makes no sense that you're just walking around vandalizing your parents' house.
Also, I just want to quickly steamroll all over Fred and call him a bitch, because Amnesia is a survival horror game and not a walking sim. In a walking sim, you are never, at least to my knowledge, there does not exist a walking sim. Sorry for the weird grammar there. There does not exist a walking sim where you are faced with an obstacle that will somehow reset the story. In Amnesia, you can die. already there. You've lost the walking sim privilege.
You can, but more than often you won't.
But anyway, it's a survival horror game. But that's a detriment of Gone Home. A detriment of something like The Beginner's Guide is that it is extremely streamlined. You literally have no input at all of what's going on. You are being led on a string. So you don't have the sense of world exploration. You are basically a passive observer of this guy's narrative, and the only exploration you do is to look around, but he will constantly nudge you and sometimes even wrestle control from you and just put a door in front of you and say, you should walk through this door. Literally, there is no other option than to do that. So these are some of the things that if you this is going back to what we were talking about with this story could be presented in any medium whatsoever. You could have presented The Beginner's Guide in pretty much any other medium. It would be slightly duller because you didn't get to look around at your own pace, but it doesn't feel like exploration to me. It's a very powerful story, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't feel like exploration. Right. In Gone Home, for some reason, they felt they had to put in a bit of interactivity, even though it's not warranted, and it does nothing for the story. In fact, it detracts because you can look up screenshots of someone who's picked up every item in the room and placed it in the foyer, and it's just a huge mess.
It's also kind of immersion breaking, because the effect that they went for is that when you pick up an object, it just floats before you. So you might think that the protagonist is able to use telekinesis and has no hands.
Exactly. And the Stanley Parable, although very, very effective in its, trying to spin the idea of interactive storytelling on its head, eventually you will run out of options. Now, you can't really fault the game for that because they can't think of everything. But it also does display in the end that you have no free will, no matter how much the medium tells you that you have the free will to break the story. Eventually you will just be running up against the same old things. So if you try to present, as I believe, but that's my personal opinion, that the Stanley Parable tries to tell you that you can shape the narrative as you want, but you're still stuck with the same option, the same build up. It doesn't really. At some point, you are going to run into. I mean, there's an achievement for letting the game sit and run for 10 years, I believe. Just sit there and do nothing. There's an achievement for that.
That's an art piece.
Yeah,
That's beautiful.
But still. There was another walking sim that I wanted to bring up, but I can't remember the name of it. I can't remember the specific of it, so let's not go there. But let's just say that we haven't really covered all the ground there is about walking sims, but I think we have just about reached the conclusion.
Yeah, I think so. I think your flesh noodle has been significantly stroked.
Oh, it is ripe and chafed at this point.
And we don't want to flesh noodle block our audience, so we should probably end it here.
Gareth, do you have any flesh noodlery that you wish to get into, or are you all good?
I'm all good. I think there's a couple of points that merit further discussion, but maybe we can do that after the cameras have shut themselves down.
There's a camera?
Oh shit!
You just got punked.
You just got flesh noodled. Well, that's it for Backseat Designers this week. If you guys enjoyed what you've just heard, you can go throw money at us. And of course, I'm very sympathetic, so I'm going to bring that up first. You can go to patreon.com/backseatdesigners and throw your money at us. And maybe if you're lucky, we'll throw you a bone and you'll get some exclusives for doing just that. And do we have to thank someone this week? Or don't we? Because Patreon is not really that transparent when you're not the guy sitting with the password. So I can't actually figure out if we have any contractual obligations.
Well, not any contractual obligations as such, but I do want to throw a bone to Michael Consul anyway, Council, whatever, because he's just he's just a great guy, and he is not only contributed greatly to us, but he also seems to genuinely enjoy what we're doing. So we can only assume the man is brain damaged.
Yeah. Cheers, Mike. Sorry about the brain damage. You can also go to our website, backseatdesigners.com, where you'll find all the links for you to subscribe to the show. We have an IRC channel, which you can access from there. We have a YouTube channel, which you can access from there. We have a Twitter, which is called @BSDesigners, where you can throw shit at us like, I don't agree with the bullshit you guys are saying, stop talking about flesh noodles. We have an open Facebook group also called Backseat Designers, where you can do basically the same thing.
But with more characters.
Yeah, but with more characters. Although Twitter are getting rid of that, but that's not really relevant.
Please, no.
Yeah, the World War is cancelled. Twitter isn't getting rid of the character limit. Now, that's it this week.
Oh wait! If you wanna send in voicemails, if you want to chime in, we are going to. Even though we pre-record these shows for this season, we still want your feedback. We still want to hear from you. So if you have, I'm getting my sentences mixed up.
Again.
No, wait.
I have an email called fred@backseatdesigners.com. You can also see this on the website. And if you have anything you want to have read up on the show, or a voicemail you want us to play, or anything basically, send it my way and I'll make sure it appears here.
Cool.
Basically, Darren.
Was that what you were trying to say, Trolls?
Yeah, and also that we will, of course, announce topics ahead of recording them.
We will. We already have a schedule which you can also access from the website. You guys are probably getting a pattern here, so go to backseatdesigners.com. All will be revealed. Now, say goodbye, Trolls.
Goodbye, finally, little flesh noodle.
And say goodbye, Gareth.
Bye!
And it's a goodbye from me as well. See you next week.
Woohoo!
No more for today.